Hey everyone, Emmerron here. So this week on How to GM, I wanted to talk a little bit about aspirational items. So those of you who are coming from other tabletop games where this is not that foreign a concept, D&D, again, you're the number one community that I am desperately hoping will try this game out because I think it does fit your sensibilities for what a tabletop game should be without being the same, and it is not terribly different. So if you are a D&D player and you are watching this video, definitely come over, check us out. It's a great time. I have a whole series. This is going to be the 13th installment in that series. I have it all on a playlist here on YouTube. So if you want to explore it further, you can look at what GMing looks like in this game. There's a bunch of good free resources for you. But I want to talk about exclusivity when it comes to items. So in D&D and similar games, we have the concept of like magic and wondrous items, these things that are hidden in the far-flung recesses and long forgotten chests and treasure hoards of the world, right? Whether it's in some ruined castle or deep dungeon or sitting under a dragon's bulk. There are things out there that we want to get, right? As many of you are aware, Cyberpunk is not a game with these fantasy tropes in it. So when we look at doing those things or incorporating items that are similar in status to those things, it gets a little weird, right? Because we're not just looking now at like the guns that you have at the start, like a heavy pistol, right? Or a very heavy pistol. Or just looking at, is it a poor quality pistol? Is it an excellent quality pistol? Like, these are all good things to keep in mind, obviously, for like what things cost and how effective they are. But something I want to call everyone's attention to is there are really a couple of things that set certain things that I call aspirational weapons or items apart from the rest. So those of you who've played Cyberpunk for a while will know what these are already, but for those of you new to the system, this might be helpful as a sort of primer, and maybe you've read it in the book already, but there are price categories in Cyberpunk Red. And those price categories go from 10 eddies to 20 eddies to 50 eddies to 100 eddies. And now once we're past this level, this is like everything your character can get on a daily basis without trying too hard, right? The next tier is 500 eddies. So this is where we get to expensive. Expensive items are harder to come by. They require a fixer or a tech who can either find or make the item for you. And usually that's going to cost you. It's not just what's on the tin. It's not a 500 eddy item now. It is a 500 eddy item baseline with a premium tacked on for either convenience or shipping or materials or time or some combination of the three. So we are looking at, that tier now getting a little pricier, right? So 500 eddies and up, we're needing that extra line to get us what we want, right? 1,000 eddies is even harder to find, right? That's very expensive. This is the highest tier of item that your character can start with at the beginning of a Cyberpunk Red game. If you're making a brand new character and this is, you're starting off with some really, really cool stuff, this is the highest price category that you will draw from, and even then, you will only get one or two of these items at the very most, and I would say one is more likely than two, because any more than one, you're going to be stretching your budget really thin, unless you don't need that much starting gear for whatever you want to do as a character concept. So beyond this now, we have two more tiers still, and the final one is kind of a catch-all. So the next tier above it is luxury. So luxury is 5,000 eddies. So 5,000 eddies is a couple of really, really well-paying gigs. This is probably at its bare minimum 3 gigs that you're going to be doing, and at least 2 of those are going to be very dangerous. And this doesn't account for the fact that you still need to pay for your food and your housing at the end of the month. You know, execs notwithstanding, your free housing is still free. But anyone paying for both of these things is going to be a little more stretched on like making sure they got that budget handled by the end of the month. So now we dive to the highest category. This is super luxury. Super luxury is any item that costs 10,000 eddies or more to infinity. So some examples of super luxury items, pretty universally, is almost every single vehicle in the game. Some very, very fancy weapons like Johnny Silverhand's Malorian 3516 is a very or super luxury, item costing 10,000 eddies. You've got, you know, some other things like buying your housing outright, you know, buying a deed to like a Conapt. That's going to run you something. I think it's definitely in that super luxury time slot where it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to probably drop 50 grand or 20 grand on this thing. Right. And an edge runner is probably not going to have that money maybe ever in your campaign, unless you are like me and you give your characters a lot of reward for what they do. And even then it's going to take them a while. You know, it's still going to be 3-4 sessions, and most of those sessions are going to involve death-defying stunts by your team. It's going to be bad, right? So when we hit this 5,000 eddy line, these really start the tier of like aspirational items. So there is a second category, and this is going to be something that some of you coming from other systems might misidentify. I know we had a little bit of struggle with this initially at our table as well. Any weapon that operates differently than the base version of itself. So a heavy pistol has the following characteristics at a base level, right? As standard heavy pistol, you can have 2 rate of fire, meaning you can shoot twice per round. It's going to have an 8-round mag. It's going to have 3d6 damage when it hits. And it's going to have 3 attachment slots that can be filled by any weapon attachment compatible with a pistol. So that's a standard heavy pistol. So now, what if that exotic pistol, or what if we make the pistol an exotic? So an exotic heavy pistol might be something that restricts its rate of fire in exchange for giving other firing modes. Or maybe it has a built-in expanded mag. Or maybe it's got some, you know, hard-lined smart gun link, right? So exotics have a couple of restrictions. The price isn't always the problem with these, though. Some exotics are as cheap as 100 eddies. They're things you could go out and just buy from your local store. What makes them exotic is their function, not their status. So function is the primary thing that makes an exotic weapon exotic. And another thing that you might see qualify an exotic weapon is requirement of like a prerequisite stat such as body to use the weapon effectively. That also qualifies an exotic weapon, because any standard weapon can be fired by anybody by making a skill check of the appropriate skill. If you have a really big gun though, like a rail gun for example, you need a lot of body to do that. So that's going to be an exotic gun of whatever type it is, right? Whether that's like a shotgun or an assault rifle, it's going to be something bigger and therefore governed by special rules. And the big thing to remember about exotics here is that unless stated otherwise, they do not function with standard weapon attachments, and they do not function with non-basic ammunition. If they load a particular type of ammunition, they'll say it, right? So if it says this can only load armor-piercing rounds, then you only can buy armor-piercing rounds for it. You can't buy basic ammo for it or incendiary ammo for it. It has to be armor piercing ammo. There are some exotics, especially those in black chrome, that say this weapon can load all standard types of ammunition that a pistol or submachine gun or whatever kind of gun it is can load. So exotics aren't a problem. To kind of recap, exotics are a matter of their function being different than the standard version of a weapon of the same type, not the fact that they are hard to find. The hard to find part is the price tag. So if the price tag is 500 eddies or more, exotic or otherwise, that gun, you need someone to help you find it. And it begins to get aspirational. It is something you have to hunt down. So now, let's talk about what we do about aspirational guns. So an important principle of Cyberpunk Red is to remember that anything that you give to an NPC can land in your player's hands. This is not a game where there is a dramatic difference between an NPC wielding a gun of a particular type and a PC wielding a gun of a particular type. Now, there are some weapons, exotic weapons specifically, that make an issue for any player wanting to try this. Namely the Kendachi swords. So Kendachi is a melee weapon manufacturer that uses orbital refined crystal to make their blades. And they have a function on each of their blades that if you have the correct biometric key, so usually there's going to be like a thumbprint or a DNA scan of some kind, when you grab the hilt, you can, as a free action, let the blade start vibrating. And if you do this, it unlocks the ability of this blade to ignore armor. And how heavy the armor can be for this to function and functionally just ignore it completely differs depending on the blade. We have one in Cyberpunk Red's core rulebook, which is the Kendachi Mono 3. It is a luxury weapon, which again is reinforcing why I say this is an aspirational sword. It's very, very, very powerful if your players get their hands on it. And then there's two others in Black Chrome, those being the Mono Wakizashi and Mono Katana, which work a little bit differently and they fit a different profile. So if you are going to, give these items to your bosses and stuff, the boss dropping this is part of your player's compensation for that gig. It is very, very, very important to remember that they can go pick that thing up. And if they forget to, that's on them. I am of the mindset that like the first one or two times I'll remind you like, hey, did you go pick that thing up? Like that sword looked pretty sick, right? You could go grab it. And because they don't always think about in Cyberpunk that, they're fighting humans, right? You're not fighting some monstrous ogre or whatever that's swinging around a giant club that you can't hold. It's gonna be the same kind of weapon you can equip as an edge runner. And so first time or two, you get a grace from me. You'll get a reminder saying, hey, player, go grab that. That's important. That is something you're gonna want. And it's important to also remember, like we discussed in our net running video, which again, if you haven't seen it, it's right up here. Remember what the group they're going against has financial access to in terms of resources, right? If you're going against a random booster gang, scavs, like, people that are usually poor, they're not regarded as being very financially well off in the city. They're not going to be running around with luxury weapons, all odds considered, right? They're not going to be looking at, carrying around Kendachi Mono 3s. They're going to probably have scabby, shitty weapons, right? Poor quality. It's not going to be an exotic. It's going to be poorly maintained, most likely. If you have a boss scav, maybe that scav got lucky and they found an excellent quality version of one of your baseline weapons. These are like the equivalent of a magic weapon. They give +1 to your attack when they're fired. And that is a really big deal, right? Like in the hands of a proficient user, that +1 is like just huge. I cannot overstate that. It doesn't sound like much, but functionally it's a massive deal. So they might have an excellent quality shotgun or pistol or whatever, right? And so the fight gets harder because they have an excellent quality weapon. They have a +1 to hit anyone that they're shooting at with that weapon. But your party gets that weapon if they die. Or maybe they negotiate it off them. Like, hey, we'll leave you alone. That gun, though, I want it. It's, is the gun worth fighting for at that point for the enemy? Is your enemy going to look at that and say, I don't really want to give it up? They might, like it may be something that they hold very, very dear to them. Maybe an ally gave it to them and died, like that is something where like you can decide as the GM what the stakes involved are. But the fact is that if you give a mook that gun is going to the players at some point down the road. And players can acquire, of course, like weapons that they can sell later on to the people that would buy them. There's always a booster ganger in need of a pistol, even if it's a shitty one, right? Not everyone in Night City is endowed with financial security, and certainly your players can take advantage of that. So let's now talk, though, about when it's appropriate to start handing these aspirational weapons out. So the first thing that you can do is present them in a night market. Now, night markets in Cyberpunk Red are kind of like these flea markets where the latest shipments that have been procured by nomads or salvaged from the sea by corporations or nomads, these are where they come to be distributed. There's usually a alley that gets kind of blockaded or temporarily secured by edge runners or gangs of some kind. And the people who get inside have their pick over these shops that are essentially just running out of people's, back of their cars, or like a very basic kind of like stall they've set up. And this can be anything that gets sold at these things. There's a set of roll tables in the New Street Economy chapter of the core rulebook that goes over random rolling your night market. There's also a function for it. I believe it might be part of the premium section of it, but it's in the Cyberpunk Red companion app as well, which is a great resource. If you don't already use it or your players don't already use it, highly recommend getting on that bandwagon. It's a great tool. But that is another way that you can kind of random roll your night market and just see what's available, right? So that is one way to do it. And bear in mind that not everything your players find at a night market need to be affordable by them, right? Sometimes it's about window shopping, and it's about seeing that gun in a display or on a table and saying, damn, that is a nice looking Militech gun. I really want that. How much does it cost? Chumba, you're going to be paying $5,000 for this. Shit. I only got 1,000. Come back when you got 5. We'll talk. And, and the night markets are temporary. So like the player might see it that night. They might never see that again. They might swap details, contact information with the vendor. And the vendor might tell them, oh man, Chum, fuck, I'm so sorry. Sold it to a guy about a week back. And I don't got that anymore. I'll let you know when I get another one in. Well, now we've got all kinds of little threads that we could do. Because now a mook has the gun. So the mook who has the gun is now a target, right? This is another thing to remember. This works both ways. The players thinking about this and like saying, well, I want that gun. They could go after that mook. They could try to take it and then deal with all the consequences that entail going after someone for their property and stealing it from them. The street doesn't like that shit. They will send people after you. There will be a gang or other edge runners, or in worst case, a corporation that comes after you. A hit squad comes down your way and they are going to try to flatline you. And they're going to take their gun back. Like that's what they're going to do. If you get your hands on a particularly hot piece of tech, and I don't mean that as like a get it's selling quick. I mean as, hey, this is an experimental gun and the corporation that it got stolen from is going to be looking for whoever has it. So like if you suddenly get known as the guy who has the experimental gun in your possession, and the scream sheets, you know, have images of you pointing this gun down at booster gangers, like all of a sudden this gets a lot hairier for you, right? Your rep is going to spread images of this gun with your face, and it's the corporation's going to come knocking before too long when they figure out where you live. So this is another great way to use it, is it can be used as kind of a cursed item to like further the plot in a kind of negative way for your players, provide them a further wall of resistance. If they are getting away with too much, you can give them an item that follows them and gives them a target on their back, right? So now let's talk about super luxury items. So everything I've talked about so far largely will apply to luxury and below, right? So luxury is many gigs or one good target that the players get, and they get that luxury item and it's super cool. Again, I do not encourage giving them up easily. Luxury items are very rare. Even if they are not the highest price category, that doesn't change the fact that they're very hard to come by. So now let's dive into super luxury. So super luxury items, by and large, are not going to be found at a night market. They are not going to be found at a, regular place that sells anything. They are going to either be stolen or offered via fixer contacts, or the one place they might show up for a kind of sold to the highest bidder fashion is at a midnight market. Now, midnight markets might just sound like a hokey thing that players are going to say, oh, you have a night market, that's Night City, midnight market, bro, okay. They're cool, I promise. So midnight markets, as contrasted to a night market, you just kind of got to know that it's there, right? You just kind of know, you walk in, if you're not sporting anything threatening, no one's going to stop you, right? Shop the stalls all you want. Something real nice and shiny is there, great. You're going to love that. Awesome, very cool. Midnight markets are where the big ticket items roll out. This is where more of those luxury and super luxury items and the really unique stuff. You want to sell a bit of art, you're doing it at a midnight market. And a midnight market is only able to be put together by a fixer that has a sufficiently high rank. And I believe the height a fixer needs to have reached in order to even organize a midnight market, it's at least rank 7. I believe it's rank 9 though. So you need a very powerful fixer to even start with these things. And one of the ones that they talk about in the core rulebook and some of the supplemental documentation is Master Kerrigan. Master Kerrigan is the kind of aristocratic face in a suit with a cat, stroking like the evil villain that they are, looking out over their empire they built as this kind of goods dealer. And he only does one midnight market a quarter. So you're either on the list or you're not. If you get an invite, you're in, right? And these are sought after things. So if someone learned that someone else had an invite to a midnight market, this might be something worth killing over, right? If you yourself have not been able to get into a midnight market and secure that invite through a more traditional, above board kind of way, there's always the 5-finger discount, or worse, murder. You could always kill for it. And so we now get to see, this is where the really valuable stuff will show up. This is where that Malorian Arms 3516 is going to show up, or where your cars are going to be sold at. Is going to be where, you're going to get real estate people selling land in the city, because they're not going to be just dealing to anyone, right? They're only going to be dealing to the upper crust of society. So now that we've kind of looked at that, midnight markets are very rare, and your players need to have a very good reason to be there. Usually they are also a place where the criminal underworld will gather. So if your players are getting a particularly dangerous or unique opportunity from someone very, very powerful, like a Master Kerrigan or someone just below him on the totem pole, they're going to go to the midnight market, probably. At the very least to get the gig, right? And at these places, it's not just like edge runners, right? It's the very rich people, corporate heads, people who have enough money to own a mansion. These are the people who are going there and going to participate in the auctions. So there's a very interesting caveat here, though. Nomads, in particular, because they're associated with a nomad family, have access to vehicles. And those vehicles are always super luxury. This is the one time where it is very possible for a player to have a super luxury good at character creation. But it is the only time that this happens. And it is not something that they have free of consequences. If that thing gets destroyed, they have to pay to fix it. And that usually costs them about 500 or 1,000 eddies to do that. And it is not cheap, right? So if they lose the car, it's really bad. Because now that car is probably worth a couple of tens of thousands of eddies. The family is out. And like the family's going to need to find a new one, right? That's not easy. Super luxury is not easy to find. So again, you know, you can steal stuff, but you better be looking for the low jack, because if you aren't, they are going to find you. They're going to fuck you up. And you as the GM should absolutely make sure that there is someone around the corner that is going to come and fuck you up if you do the wrong thing. Because that's part of the beauty of these items. They are so sought after that even if you got them legitimately, or, you know, got them after killing someone that didn't really have a rep, just having it is enough to get people on your back. It paints a target on your back. Unless you're living in the best neighborhoods of the city, you are a target. And that is the beauty of it. So the far-flung crevices of Night City are not caves full of treasure or ancient temples, but instead they are the residences of the ultra-rich. They are the dens of the people that got lucky and have them anyway, even if they don't look like they should. Or they're the one poor cyber psycho that, you know, really had a bad day and you flatlined them. Now all their shiny shit is yours. So when it comes to weapons, those are easy, right? For cyberware, you're going to need a med tech, or at the very least to conscript the, you know, services of one, or a tech. Basically, either one of them can repair cyber tech that you salvage off of a body. Anyone can take, you know, like a blade or a saw and like hack a limb off and shove that in a body bag and just take it to the med tech and have them clean it up or repair it. But if you want to extract it safely as a player, you need special skills. Either surgery, which is a medtech skill to extract it, or cyber tech to fabricate or repair it. If you are if you're a tech, you can fabricate it. If you are anyone, you can roll a sufficiently high cyber tech check to try and repair it. So that's pretty much my primer, though. I hope this helps. As always, if you feel there is some facet of this that I did not cover adequately, or that you would like to hear kind of some more follow-up on, I have done shorts in the past for other videos that needed a little extra, like embellishment on one part of the topic or something. So if you would like to leave any suggestions down in the comments below, I would appreciate it. Other GMs would certainly appreciate it as well, as these videos are, meant to be instructional to as wide an audience as possible. So I would love that feedback. If you're seeing this on Reddit, same thing applies. Down in the comments, I will respond. If I do make a short or other video response to your comments, you know what it is. But beyond that, that's going to do it for me this week. Again, my name is Emmerron. Please like and subscribe if you think I have earned it. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Stay healthy, stay safe, and until we speak again, peace.